Quadratic graphs. After watching this video, I will be able to interpret positive, negative, increasing and decreasing behavior, extrema, and find the axis of symmetry. So graphs are actually really important in life because it's easier to kind of portray a picture of what's happening mathematically. And there are specific words that we can use to kind of describe what's happening in a graph. So positive and negative basically means that the graph is either above the x-axis, which means positive, or below the x-axis, which means negative. So given in my graph, all that is blue is positive because it's above x-axis. All that is red is below x-axis, so it's negative. We can also talk about increasing or decreasing, and that is viewed from the left to right because we read from left to right. So as you're going to the right, what is happening? Well, in this case, we are decreasing, and then we start to increase again. Then we decrease. We can also talk about extrema, which is just a word to say minimum or maximum, the two extremes, the most lowest point, the most highest point. And we can also talk in relation to relative minimum or relative maximum, which just means it's not the most extreme point, but it's an extreme point for that particular part of the graph. So if I were to just like put in a zoom box to right here, this would be the minimum because at that specific point in the graph, it is lower than everything else. And we can kind of just use all of these words to kind of describe an end behavior and actually describe what's happening visually in the graph. In our previous lesson video, we were also talking about axis of symmetry, and we basically said it's a line that cuts through your parabola so that one half is exactly matching the other half. Well, sometimes you aren't given the graph and you're not sure what the axis of symmetry is because you don't have a picture to see it. So we can actually calculate what the axis of symmetry is using the formula provided. So we want to remember that A, B, and C are just numbers in my quadratic equation. So this is a standard form equation. So this means ax squared plus bx plus c. So 2 is my A, -8 is my B, and 3 is my C. So I'm going to plug in my numbers into my formula. So my formula says the opposite of -8. So -8 and its opposite. And then 2 just comes from the formula, but then 2 comes from my A. So I will end up with an axis of symmetry of x equals 2. Back when we were graphing straight lines, we said that x equals a number created a vertical line at the specific number. So I will end up with this vertical line, which is known as my axis of symmetry, abbreviated AOS. So looking at my graph, I can also find the extremal points because the minimum would just be the lowest point. And when we're talking about a vertex, about a parabola, then it just so happens that the minimum point will most likely be the vertex, or it might be a maximum point depending how the parabola is located. If you have a minimum, you might not have a maximum. So here, given the graph, I want to find the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and whether it has a max or a min. So axis of symmetry, I could figure it out visually because I see that this point right here, up on top, axis of symmetry has to cut through the vertex. So I just need to find numbers. So this is my origin. So that means this must be -1. So axis of symmetry is x equals -1. So what is the vertex? Well, what point is that? -1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the max or the min. Well, this is the highest point, so it has to be a maximum. So I'm going to say max at -1, 5, which just so happens to be the vertex. A study tip is when you're trying to figure out all the key factors of a function, you might want to start with the axis of symmetry because that might be the easiest to find first. So now you try, given the graph below, which answer choice best answers or best identifies all of the characteristics. Okay, so based on my graph given, this must be my axis of symmetry, which means this is a vertex, whatever point that is. And because that is the lowest point, it must be a min. So already I can eliminate B and D as an answer choice because those are talking about max. So there is only a minimum point so far. And I just need to decide which one works. Well, here is my origin because I have X and Y. So we are at -2. So it has to be X equals -2. So C is the only possible answer choice.